There's something about the sea. It listens, but it never speaks. It remembers, but it never confesses. For as long as people have sailed across its endless blue, the ocean has been both a path and a graveyard. Ships glide across it like thoughts, born in a moment of hope, vanishing without warning. Some are found years later, drifting in silence, their sails torn but still standing, their decks empty. No crew, no trace of struggle, just the sound of the wind whispering through ropes that no one holds anymore. Sailors used to say that when a ship disappears, it's not gone, it's taken. The sea, they believed, was alive. Not in the way forests are alive with roots and breath, but alive in a way that's colder, hungrier. Old mariners spoke of ghost ships, vessels that glide through fog with lanterns burning and no one aboard to light them. Some said they were omens, that to see one meant your own ship would soon follow. Others whispered that they were caught between worlds, ships that couldn't find the shore, and souls that couldn't find peace. And somewhere in the folds of time, the ocean began to collect them. Ships from wars, from storms, from voyages that began with songs and ended with screams.
It was December 1872. The Atlantic was vast and gray, as it always is when the wind turns cold. A British ship, Die Gracia, was gliding through gentle waves when its crew spotted something strange on the horizon. A vessel, drifting quietly, its sails half torn, its course uncertain. As they drew closer, they saw her name, Mary Celeste. She should have been weeks ahead of them. She had left New York full of life, with Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife, their 2-year-old daughter, and a small, trusted crew. They were bound for Italy. But what the sailors found that day was a floating mystery, one that the sea still refuses to explain. The decks were tidy. The cargo was untouched. There was food on the table, a sewing machine mid-use, a cup of coffee left cooling, as if everyone had simply stepped out for a moment and forgotten to return. The lifeboat was missing. The logbook ended abruptly. No signs of a struggle, no storm damage, no blood. Everything and everyone was gone.
When Di Grazia's crew brought the ship back to port, the world was spellbound. Newspapers whispered of mutiny, pirates. Some said alcohol fumes from the cargo forced them to flee in panic. Others claimed the captain went mad under some unseen curse. But the truth, if it existed, was swallowed by the same waters that once carried them. And so Mary Celeste became more than a story. She became a legend, a ship forever sailing without her people, an echo of human curiosity and fear. For centuries she has drifted not just across oceans, but across dreams, reminding us that not every question is meant to be answered. But she is not alone, because every age, every corner of the world has had its own phantom vessel, and some, the sailors say, are not abandoned at all. Some are still crewed by those who never realized they were dead. Beneath the blue stillness of Micronesia, where coral blooms like a painter's forgotten palette, there lies a graveyard of metal and silence. It is beautiful, and it should not be. This is Chuk Lagoon, once known as Truck Lagoon, the hidden naval base of Imperial Japan during the Second World War. In February 1944, the U.S. Navy descended upon it in an operation so devastating, so sudden, that hundreds of ships and planes were sent to the bottom in just 2 days, and they never came back up. Today, divers describe it as otherworldly, a place where time hasn't passed so much as thickened. Step by step, bubble by bubble, they descend through warm turquoise light and find entire worlds perfectly preserved in salt and shadow. The ships still wear their guns. Bottles, shoes, teacups, even typewriters lie untouched. In one cabin, a clock has stopped at 8:03 a.m., as if the ocean decided that was the right moment for forever. You can still see the murals painted by sailors on the mess walls. Girls in dresses they would never see again. Laughter sealed under decades of coral. Fish swim through the open doors of radio rooms, nibbling the wires that once carried orders of war. It's not just wreckage down there. It's a fleet caught mid-breath. Each ship feels paused, as if waiting for a command that will never come. The locals say the lagoon hums at night, that if you listen closely enough from the shore, you can hear engines turning over, softly, faintly, as if the ships are trying to remember what it felt like to move. Divers tell stories too, of shadows that drift against the current, of air bubbles that rise from nowhere, of the eerie calm that falls the moment you stop moving, when the sea seems to exhale around you, and you realize there are more eyes here than you can see. Some believe the spirits of those sailors remain below, not out of vengeance, but confusion. Because when you die in the middle of orders, when you are halfway through a duty, perhaps even death must wait until it's complete. And so the ships wait, rusting, glowing faintly in moonlit shallows. The coral grows, the crabs wander through the cabins, and the ocean keeps its promise to hold what humans leave behind.
The Lady Lovibond. It was Valentine's Day, 1748. The wind off the English Channel was cold, but inside the ship called Lady Lovibond there was laughter, music, and the smell of wine. Captain Simon Reed had just been married, and against every sailor's superstition he had brought his new bride aboard. Her name was Annetta. She wore a white dress that shimmered under the ship's lanterns, and when she smiled, even the crew dared to smile with her. The captain wanted a voyage down the Thames, a honeymoon on the waves he loved more than land. It should have been a simple celebration, but joy, as history loves to remind us, rarely travels alone. Among the crew was the first mate, John Rivers. He had once loved Annetta too, quietly, hopelessly. He watched her now, arm in arm with the captain, and the bitterness bloomed like storm clouds over his reason.
As the ship neared the Goodwin Sands, a stretch of shallow, treacherous water off the Kent coast, River's envy curdled into something else. He seized the wheel, the helmsman shouted, the deck lurched, and then a sound like thunder cracking beneath the sea. The Lady Lovibond struck the sands and shattered. Every light was swallowed, every laugh cut short. By dawn, there was nothing but wreckage, no survivors, just the faint scent of roses and salt on the air. But the story didn't end there. Every 50 years, on that same night, February 13th, the Lady Lovibond is said to appear again, gliding gracefully through the mist, its deck aglow with lanterns, its sails untouched by wind. Fishermen speak of hearing music, faint, ghostly violins, and the sound of laughter carried across the tide. Then, just as suddenly, the ship vanishes into the foam.
In 1798, 1848, and 1948, recorded sightings came again, each time at the Goodwin Sands, each time with no trace the next morning. No one knows why her haunting is bound to the calendar, or why love and jealousy can anchor a soul as surely as any chain. But perhaps it's because the Lady Lovibond wasn't destroyed by the sea at all. She was destroyed by the most human storm of all, a broken heart. And so she sails still, a wedding that never ends, a honeymoon cursed to circle the same stretch of coast, forever waiting for forgiveness.
The Bay Chimo, the ship that refused to die. The year was 1931, and the Arctic was already closing its jaws. In the gray dawn, the cargo ship Bay Chimo pushed through sheets of sea ice, her hull creaking like old bones. She belonged to the Hudson's Bay Company, a floating merchant carrying furs and goods between trading posts along the northern coasts of Canada and Alaska. Her crew were men used to hardship, faces red from wind, eyes squinting through frost. But that winter, even they began to whisper that something felt wrong. The compass jittered, the ice closed faster than usual, and the silence, it wasn't the quiet of peace. It was the quiet of being watched. By October, the Bay Chimo was trapped. The ice clamped around her hull like an iron fist. The crew waited, hoping for a thaw that never came. When the weather worsened, they made camp on the ice itself, a cluster of tents and oil lamps, a fragile civilization surrounded by nothing but white. Then one night, a blizzard hit. When dawn came, the ship was gone, vanished.
The men searched for days, and when they finally found her, she was miles away, half embedded in another field of ice, as if she had drifted in her sleep. Deeming her too damaged to save, the company abandoned her. They took what they could and left the Bechamo to die under the Arctic sky. But she didn't die. Over the following decades, the Bechamo refused to disappear.
Hunters spotted her drifting past Alaska in 1933. A year later, another ship reported her frozen in again, her decks eerily intact, her portholes black and watching. In 1939, a group of Inupiat hunters boarded her briefly, still stocked with supplies, still bearing her name in peeling paint. Then came 1940, 1942, 1962. Each time she appeared again, drifting, silent, impossible. No crew, no explanation. Just a ghost ship wandering a frozen sea that no living sailor could survive for long. And each year the stories grew stranger. Some said she glowed faintly in the midnight sun. Others swore she moved against the current, as if guided by some unseen hand.
Her last confirmed sighting came in 1969, 38 years after she was abandoned. No one knows what finally became of her. Maybe she broke apart beneath the ice, splintered and buried where no diver will ever go. Or maybe she's still out there, a relic of human stubbornness and Arctic indifference, circling slowly in the fog, a ship that outlived her purpose, her crew, and her own century. The ocean doesn't always take what we give it. Sometimes it gives it back, changed, hollow, and still haunting the living.
The Flying Dutchman, the captain who challenged God and lost. Every sea has its ghost, but only one haunts the whole world. For centuries, sailors whispered his name like a prayer and a warning. The Flying Dutchman. He wasn't born of a single tragedy or a single voyage, but of every captain's secret fear. That there are some storms you don't sail through, you sail into. The legend begins, as all good ones do, with a man who refused to turn back. Some say his name was Captain Hendrik van der Decken, a Dutchman bound for the East Indies, laden with spices, silk, and pride. He set sail from Amsterdam, and for a while the wind was kind. But as his ship rounded the Cape of Good Hope, the weather turned. The waves grew like mountains. The wind screamed through the rigging. The crew begged the captain to turn back, to find shelter, to pray, to live. Van der Decken only laughed. "Though I sail until Judgment Day," he shouted, "I will round this cape even if it damns me." And so the sea took him at his word. When dawn came, there was no ship, only foam, only silence.
But the Flying Dutchman never truly sank. She was condemned to sail forever. Her captain lashed to the wheel, her crew cursed to obey. Ghostly figures seen through the mist, faces pale as drowned wax, sails glowing with a light that had no source. For generations, sailors claimed to see her, a phantom galleon racing against an invisible wind. To some, she appeared in warning, a vision before a storm or disaster. To others, she was the storm itself, the embodiment of hubris punished.
Even modern accounts, yes, even into the 20th century, speak of strange sightings near the Cape of Good Hope. A red light flickering through the fog, a full-rigged ship sailing against the wind, and just before she vanishes, a voice carried over the water, a single hollow cry, "Turn back." Poets wrote about her. Painters tried to capture her glow. Sailors made signs of the cross and refused to speak her name aloud, because if you saw the Flying Dutchman, it didn't just mean death was near. It meant your fate was already decided. But behind the myth lies something achingly human. The Dutchman is not only a curse, he is pride personified. A man who could not surrender, even to nature, even to God, even when surrender was the only thing left to save him.
And that, perhaps, is why his legend endures. Because, deep down, every ship that sails into an unknown horizon carries a little piece of him. That stubborn refusal to yield, to turn back, to believe that our will can outlast the wind. The ghost fleet of Truk Lagoon, the underwater city of the dead. It begins with silence, the kind of silence that feels heavy, as if the ocean itself is holding its breath. You're floating above Truk Lagoon, a wide turquoise expanse in the Pacific, ringed by islands that look almost too peaceful to be the site of one of the greatest naval graveyards on Earth. Here, beneath the water, lies an entire fleet, dozens of Japanese ships sunk in a single apocalyptic day during World War II. February 17th, 1944. The Americans called it Operation Hailstone. It lasted just 2 days. 2 days of bombs, torpedoes, and fire so fierce it melted steel into coral. When the smoke cleared, the lagoon became a cemetery. Over 40 ships sank, along with hundreds of planes and thousands of men. They sank so quickly, so completely, that the ocean didn't have time to scatter them. And so they remain, still upright, still waiting. The sea did not destroy them, it preserved them. Today, divers who descend into Truk Lagoon find a city of ghosts resting in perfect stillness. Cargo ships with bicycles still strapped to their decks. Mess halls with bottles lined neatly on tables. Typewriters, shoes, porcelain teacups. And deeper still, the sleeping shapes of crewmen who never left. The sunlight filters down in shafts, painting everything in shifting blue and gold. Fish swim through the corridors of submarines. Coral grows across gun barrels like delicate lace. The air bubbles from a diver's breath float toward the ceiling of a captain's cabin that hasn't seen air in 80 years. Some call it haunting. Others call it holy. Because the ghost fleet of Truk Lagoon isn't just a relic of war. It's a moment frozen in the exact second between life and death, between violence and peace. And down there, you can feel it. The eerie calm, the weight of memory. The ocean has turned wreckage into a memorial, and death into something strangely beautiful. It's said that if you listen closely while diving there, you can still hear the faint echo of an engine, a fragment of a song from the radio, a voice calling across static. But maybe that's just the sea, telling its story the only way it knows how, through whispers and pressure, through the ghosts it refused to let drift away. The Octavius, the ship that finished its voyage without its crew. It was 1775 in the still blue stretch of the North Atlantic. The whaling ship Herald spotted something strange drifting on the horizon. A three-masted schooner, sails in tatters, rocking gently with the current. No flag, no movement. Just a ship, alone in the sea, as if it had been forgotten by time. The Herald's captain sent a small crew to investigate. Their oars cut through the cold water. When they reached the vessel, they found her name on the stern, Octavius. She looked weathered, her wood grayed and stiff from years of wind and salt. Yet when they boarded, everything seemed frozen in place, as though the world had stopped mid-breath. The first mate of the Herald later described a silence so deep it hurt to breathe. Below deck, they found the crew, or what was left of them. Men seated where they had fallen asleep, hands still on ropes, eyes open but glazed white with frost. Their bodies were perfectly preserved, frozen by the Arctic air. And in the captain's cabin, they found the last scene of the voyage. The captain sat at his desk, pen still in hand, his logbook open before him. A woman, perhaps his wife, lay on the bunk, her form covered by a thin layer of snow that had drifted through a cracked window. A child rested beside her. The captain's final entry read, "We have been trapped in the ice for weeks. The cold is beyond endurance. My crew is dying. I fear we are lost." The entry was dated 1762, 13 years earlier. The realization hit like thunder. If the records were right, the Octavius had left England in 1761, bound for China, and had somehow attempted the fabled Northwest Passage, sailing across the top of the world where no ship had ever passed. She had made it through, She had completed the journey, but her crew hadn't lived to see it. The Octavius had crossed the passage entirely frozen, a ghost piloted by wind and current, traveling for 13 years before being found. The men from the Herald, unnerved, took the logbook and fled. When they turned back to look, the Octavius had already begun to drift away, slowly, silently, back into the fog. She was never seen again. Some say she still sails the northern waters, appearing as a mirage in the Arctic mist, her masts brittle, her sails rimed with frost, her crew still seated, frozen at their posts, sailing forever toward a destination long forgotten. Others claim the Octavius was just a story, a ghost tale born from whalers and whiskey. But legends endure for a reason, and sometimes the sea keeps its best secrets under ice.
The SS Valentia, the ship that refused to die. It began in January of 1906. The SS Valentia, a passenger steamer bound from San Francisco to Seattle, was carrying 108 souls, men, women, and children. The night was cruel. Rain came in sheets. The wind howled like something alive. Somewhere off the rugged coast of Vancouver Island, the Valentia lost her bearings. Her compass spun wildly, her captain steering blind through the black. And then, with a sound like the tearing of the earth itself, she struck a reef. The ship shuddered, split open like fruit against the rocks. Cold seawater rushed in. The Valentia's decks tilted, its lifeboats half torn before they even touched the water. The passengers, terrified, soaked and shivering, huddled together as the waves clawed at the ship's sides. From the shore, rescuers could see her lights flickering in the storm. But the cliffs were too steep, the sea too wild. They could do nothing but watch. For 36 hours, they stood helplessly as the ship slowly came apart. Men and women clung to the rigging, a trembling forest of human shapes, crying, praying, waiting for the inevitable. When dawn came, the Valencia was gone. Her wreck lay scattered along the jagged rocks. Only 37 people survived, and among the missing were every single woman and child aboard. But the Valencia's story didn't end with the storm. Not long after, sailors began to whisper. They said they'd seen her again, a ghostly steamer appearing in the mists near Pachina Point, its decks crowded with phantom figures, their faces pale, eyes hollow, their hands reaching out through the fog. The legend grew. Locals claimed that even decades later, lifeboats from the Valencia would wash ashore, their wood bleached white by time, still bearing the ship's name. One such lifeboat was found floating quietly near Barkley Sound 27 years after the wreck, perfectly intact. No barnacles, no rot, just drifting, empty,
as though it had left the ship only yesterday. In the years that followed, fishermen spoke of hearing screams in the wind, of lanterns moving across the cliffs at night where no man could walk. They called that stretch of coast the graveyard of the Pacific. And to this day, when the fog rolls in thick and low, some say you can still hear the creak of timbers and the faint cries of passengers who never reached shore. The sea remembers everything, and sometimes it brings the past back to the surface just long enough to remind us that it never truly left.
Every ocean has its secrets. Some are buried under miles of black water. Others float quietly on the surface, pretending to be ordinary waves. But the truth is, the sea is a kind of memory, vast, ancient, and deeply untrustworthy. It holds everything it touches: a pearl, a body, a dream, a ship that once believed it could outrun a storm. There are stories the sailors no longer tell, not because they are forgotten, but because they've become part of the water itself. The Valencia, the Mary Celeste, the Octavius, names that sound like lullabies when whispered over salt air. And yet, for every ship we found, there are hundreds that simply disappeared. No wreckage, no message, no goodbye. Some say they sailed into another world. Others say they became the sea itself, suspended between time and tide, their crews still tending to ghostly duties in a place where dawn never comes. There's a theory among deep-sea divers that below a certain depth, sound travels not as vibration, but as memory. That if you listen long enough, you might hear not fish or current, but the voices of the lost. And maybe that's why ghost ships linger. Not as hauntings, but as echoes. The ocean doesn't want to scare us. It wants to be remembered. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine the slow sway of the deck beneath your feet, the soft groan of ropes and timbers, the moonlight folding gently over the water. Far in the distance, a bell rings, once, twice, then fades into the mist. You don't know if it's calling you home or warning you to stay away. But it doesn't matter. You're already adrift, safe and small, in a world far too large to ever truly be known. The sea does not remember names. It remembers motion, the endless rhythm of coming and going, of leaving and never truly arriving. Somewhere beneath those silver blue waves, the bones of sailors sleep in silence, their ships now gardens of coral and pearl.
The ropes that once held their masts now cradle seaweed, and the compasses that once pointed home spin gently in the dark, as if still looking for something to believe in. They say time loses its shape underwater. Minutes drift into hours, hours dissolve into centuries, and somewhere in that endless blue hush, every story becomes one. The ship that never came back, the lover who waited at the shore, the letter that never reached its port, all of it folds softly into the current.
If you listen closely, you can still hear the ocean breathe. It exhales through the cracks of an old hull, inhales through the spaces between stars and tide. Every wave that brushes the sand is a whisper of the ones who vanished, not gone, just carried. And perhaps that's what ghost ships really are. Not curses, not warnings, but gentle reminders that everything we love, everything we lose, continues its quiet voyage somewhere beyond our sight. So, as you drift tonight, let the sound of the sea cradle you. Let it blur the edges of the world. You're safe now. The storm has passed. The lanterns are lit. And far, far beyond the horizon, where no map can follow, 1,000 forgotten ships sail softly in the moonlight. Each one a memory, each one a lullaby.